The Servants of the Queen by Rudyard Kipling. It had been raining heavily for one whole month, raining on a camp of 30,000 men and thousands of camels, elephants, horses, bullocks, and mules, all gathered together at a place called Rawalpindi to be reviewed by the Viceroy of India. He was receiving a visit from the Amir of Afghanistan, a wild king of a very wild country. And the Amir had brought with him for bodyguard 800 men and horses who had never seen a camp or a locomotive before in their lives. Savage men and savage horses from somewhere at the back of Central Asia. Every night, a mob of these horses would be sure to break their heel ropes and stampede up and down the camp through the mud in the dark, or the camels would break loose and run about and fall over the ropes of the tents. And you could imagine how pleasant that was for men trying to go to sleep. My tents lay far away from the camel lines, and I thought it was safe. But one night a man popped his head in and shouted, "Get out, quick! They're coming! My tent's gone!" I knew who they were, so I put on my boots and waterproof and scuttled out into the slush. Little Vixen, my fox terrier, went out through the other side, and then there was a roaring and a grunting and a bubbling, and I saw the tent cave in as the pole snapped and began to dance about like a mad ghost. A camel had blundered into it, and, wet and angry as I was, I could not help laughing. Then I ran on because I did not know how many camels might have got loose, and before long I was out of sight of the camp, plowing my way through the mud. At last I fell over the tail end of a gun, and by that knew I was somewhere near the artillery lines where the cannon were stacked at night. As I did not want to plouder about any more in the drizzle and the dark, I put my waterproof over the muzzle of one gun, and I made a sort of wigwam with the 2 or 3 rammers that I found, and lay along the tail of another gun, wondering where Vixen had got to, and where I might be. Just as I was getting ready to go to sleep, I heard a jingle of harness, and a grunt, and a mule passed me, shaking his wet ears. He belonged to a screw gun battery, for I could hear the rattle of the straps and rings and chains and things on his saddle pad. The screw guns are tiny little cannon made in 2 pieces that are screwed together when the time comes to use them. They are taken up mountains, anywhere that a mule can find a road, and they are very useful for fighting in rocky country. Behind the mule there was a camel, with his big soft feet squelching and slipping in the mud, and his neck bobbing to and fro like a strayed hen's. Luckily, I knew enough of beast language, not wild beast language, but camp beast language, of course, from the natives to know what he was saying. He must have been the one that flopped into my tent, for he called to the mule, "What shall I do? Where shall I go? I have fought with a white thing that waved, and it took a stick and hit me on the neck." That was my broken tent pole, and I was very glad to know it. "Shall we run on?" "Oh, it was you," said the mule. "You and your friends that have been disturbing the camp? All right. You'll be beaten for this in the morning, but I may as well give you something on account now." I heard the harness jingle as the mule backed and caught the camel 2 kicks in the ribs that rang like a drum. "Another time," he said, "you'll know better than to run through a mule battery at night shouting 'Thieves' and 'Fire'! Sit down and keep your silly neck quiet." The camel doubled up camel fashion, like a 2-foot rule, and sat down whimpering. There was a regular beat of hoofs in the darkness, and a big troop horse cantered up as steadily as though he were on parade, jumped a gun tail, and landed close to the mule. "It's disgraceful," he said, blowing out his nostrils. "Those camels have rocketed through our lines again, the 3rd time this week. How's a horse to keep his condition if he isn't allowed to sleep? Who's here?" "I'm the breech-piece mule of number 2 gun of the 1st screw battery," said the mule, "and the other's one of your friends. He's waked me up, too." "Who are you?" "Number 15, E Troop, 9th Lancers. Dick Cunliffe's horse. Stand over a little there." "Oh, beg your pardon," said the mule. "It's dark to see much. Aren't these camels too sickening for anything? I walked out of my lines to get a little peace and quiet here." "My lords," said the camel humbly, We dreamed bad dreams in the night, and we were very much afraid. I am only a baggage camel of the 39th Native Infantry, and I am not as brave as you are, my lords. Then why didn't you stay and carry baggage for the 39th Native Infantry, instead of running all around the camp? Said the mule. They were such very bad dreams, said the camel. I am sorry. Listen, what is that? Shall we run on again? Sit down, said the mule, or you'll snap your long stick legs between the guns. He cocked one ear and listened. Bullocks, he said. Gun bullocks. On my word, you and your friends have waked the camp very thoroughly. It takes a good deal of prodding to put up a gun bullock. I heard a chain dragging along the ground, and a yoke of the great sulky white bullocks that drag the heavy siege guns when the elephants won't go any nearer to the firing came shouldering along together. Almost stepping on the chain was another battery mule, calling wildly for Billy. That's one of our recruits, said the old mule to the troop horse. He's calling for me. Here, youngster, stop squealing. The dark never hurt anybody yet. The gun bullocks lay down together and began chewing the cud, but the young mule huddled close to Billy. Things, he said. Fearful and horrible things, Billy. They came into our lines while we were asleep. Do you think they'll kill us? I have a very great mind to give you a #1 kicking, said Billy. The idea of a 14-hand mule with your training disgracing the battery before this gentleman? Gently, gently, said the troop horse. Remember, they are always like this to begin with. The first time I ever saw a man, it was in Australia when I was a 3-year-old, I ran for half a day. And if I'd seen a camel, I should have been running still. Nearly all our horses for the English cavalry are brought to India from Australia, and are broken in by the troopers themselves. True enough, said Billy. Stop shaking, youngster. The first time they put the full harness with all its chains on my back, I stood on my forelegs and kicked every bit of it off. I hadn't learned the real science of kicking then, but the battery said they had never seen anything like it. But this wasn't harness or anything that jingled, said the young mule. You know I don't mind that now, Billy. It was things like trees, and they fell up and down the lines and bubbled, and my head rope broke, and I couldn't find my driver, and I couldn't find you, Billy, and I ran off with these gentlemen. Said Billy. As soon as I heard the camels were loose, I came away on my own account. When a battery, a screw-gun mule, calls gun bullocks gentlemen, he must be very badly shaken up. Who are you fellows on the ground there? The gun bullocks rolled their cuds and answered both together. The 7th yoke of the 1st gun of the big gun battery. We were asleep when the camels came, but then we were trampled on. We got up and walked away. It is better to lie quiet in the mud than to be disturbed on good bedding. We told your friend here that there was nothing to be afraid of, but he knew so much that he thought otherwise. Wah! They went on chewing. That comes of being afraid, said Billy. You get laughed at by gun bullocks. I hope you like it, young un. The young mule's teeth snapped, and I heard him say something about not being afraid of any beefy old bullock in the world, but the bullocks only clicked their horns together and went on chewing. Now, don't be angry after you've been afraid. That's the worst kind of cowardice, said the troop horse. Anybody can forgive him for being scared in the night. I think, if they see things they don't understand. We've broken out of our pickets again and again, 450 of us, just because a new recruit got to telling tales of whip snakes at home in Australia, till we were scared to death of the loose ends of our head ropes. That's all very well in camp, said Billy. I'm not above stampeding myself for the fun of the thing, but when I haven't been out for a day or two. But what do you do on active service? Oh, that's quite another set of new shoes, said the troop horse. Dick Cunliffe's on my back then, and drives his knees into me, and all I have to do is watch where I am putting my feet, and keep my hind legs well under me, and be bridle-wise. What's bridle-wise? Said the young mule. By the blue gums of the back blocks, snorted the troop horse. Do you mean to say you aren't taught to be bridle-wise in your business? How can you do anything, unless you can spin round at once when the rein is pressed on your neck? It means life or death to your man, and of course that's life and death to you. Get round with your hind legs under you the instant you feel the reins on your neck. If you haven't room to swing round, rear up a little and come round on your hind legs. That's being bridle-wise. We aren't taught that way, said Billy the mule stiffly. We're taught to obey the man in our head. Step off when he says so and step in when he says so. I suppose it comes to the same thing. Now, with all this fine, fancy business and rearing, which must be very bad for your hocks, what do you do? That depends, said the troop horse. Generally, I have to go in among a lot of yelling, hairy men with knives. Long, shining knives, worse than the farrier's knives. And I have to take care that Dick's boot is just touching the next man's boot without crushing it. I can see Dick's lance to the right of my right eye, and I know I'm safe. I shouldn't care to be the man or horse that stood up to Dick and me when we're in a hurry. Don't the knives hurt? Said the young mule. Well, I got cut across the chest once, but that wasn't Dick's fault. A lot I should have cared whose fault it was if it hurt, said the young mule. You must, said the troop horse. If you don't trust your man, you might as well run away at once. That's what some of our horses do, and I don't blame them. As I was saying, it wasn't Dick's fault. The man was lying on the ground, and I stretched myself not to tread on him, and he slashed up at me. Next time I have to go over a man lying down, I shall step on him, hard. Said Billy. Sounds very foolish. Knives are dirty things at any time. The proper thing to do is to climb up a mountain with a well-balanced saddle, hang on by all 4 feet and your ears too, and creep and crawl and wriggle along till you come out hundreds of feet above anyone else, on a ledge where there's just room enough for your hoofs. Then you stand still and keep quiet. Never ask a man to hold your head, young un. Keep quiet while the guns are being put together, and then you watch the little poppy shells drop down into the treetops ever so far below. Don't you ever trip? Said the troop horse. They say that when a mule trips, you can split a hen's ear, said Billy. Now and again, perhaps a badly packed saddle will upset a mule, but it's very seldom. I wish I could show you our business. It's beautiful. Why, it took me 3 years to find out what the men were driving at. The science of the thing is to never show up against the skyline, because if you do, you may get fired at. Remember that, young un. Always keep hidden as much as possible, even if you have to go a mile out of your way. I lead the battery when it comes to that sort of climbing. Fired at? Without the chance of running into the people who are firing? Said the troop horse, thinking hard. I couldn't stand that. I should want to charge. With Dick. Oh, no, you wouldn't. You know that as soon as the guns are in position, they'll do all the charging. That's scientific and neat. But knives, pah! The baggage camel had been bobbing his head to and fro for some time, anxious to get a word in edgewise. Then I heard him say, as he cleared his throat nervously, I have fought a little, but not in that climbing way or that running way. No. Now you mention it, said Billy, you don't look as though you were made for climbing or running. Much. Well, how was it, old hay bales? The proper way, said the camel. We all sat down. Oh, my crupper and breastplate, said the troop horse under his breath. Sat down? We sat down, 100 of us, the camel went on, in a big square, and the men piled our kajawas, our packs and saddles, outside the square, and they fired over our backs, the men did, on all sides of the square. What sort of men? Any men that came along? Said the troop horse. They teach us in riding school to lie down and let our masters fire across us, but Dick Cunliffe is the only man I'd trust to do that. Tickles my girths, and besides, I can't see with my head on the ground. What does it matter who fires across you? Said the camel. There are plenty of men and plenty of other camels close by, and a great many clouds of smoke. I am not frightened then. I sit still and wait. And yet, said Billy, you dream bad dreams and upset the camp at night. Well, before I'd lie down, not to speak of sitting down, and let a man fire across me, my heels and his head would have something to say to each other. Did you ever hear anything so awful as that? There was a long silence, and then one of the gun bullocks lifted up his big head and said, This is very foolish indeed. There is only one way of fighting. Oh, go on, said Billy. Please don't mind me. I suppose you fellows fight standing on your tails? Only one way, said the two together. They must have been twins. This is that way, to put all 20 yoke of us to the big gun as soon as Two Tails trumpets. Two Tails is camp slang for the elephant. What does Two Tails trumpet for? Said the young mule. To show that he is not going any nearer to the smoke on the other side. Two Tails is a great coward. Then we tug the big gun all together. Hey-ya, hulla, hey-ya, hulla. We do not climb like cats, nor run like calves. We go across the level plain, 20 yoke of us, till we are unyoked again. And we graze, while the big guns talk across the plain to some town with mud walls, and pieces of the wall fall out, and the dust goes up as though many cattle were coming home. Oh, and you choose that time for grazing, said the young mule. That time or any other. Eating is always good. We eat till we are yoked up again and tug the gun back to where Two Tails is waiting for it. Sometimes there are big guns in the city that speak back, and some of us are killed, and then there is all the more grazing for those that are left. This is fate, nothing but fate. Nonetheless, Two Tails is a great coward. That is the proper way to fight. We are brothers from Hapur. Our father was a sacred bull of Shiva. We have spoken. First half.